Sarah Martinez stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection with the same critical eyes that had haunted her throughout high school. Even now, at 28, she could still hear the cruel laughter echoing from the hallways of Westfield High. The memories rushed back like a flood she couldn't stop. Back then, she had been the girl who ate lunch alone in the library corner, clutching her worn paperback novels like shields against the world. Her thick glasses constantly slipped down her nose, and her hand-me-down clothes never quite fit right. While other students talked about weekend parties and shopping trips, Sarah worked evenings at the local grocery store to help her single mother pay the bills. The worst part hadn't been the obvious bullying. It was the casual dismissal. The way conversations stopped when she approached. The eye rolls when teachers paired her with popular kids for group projects. Jessica Chen and her circle of friends had perfected the art of making Sarah invisible while simultaneously ensuring she felt every ounce of their disdain. "Look, it's the bookworm," Jessica would whisper loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Does she ever talk to actual people? Or just fictional characters?" Sarah remembered the day she had finally worked up the courage to ask David Thompson to the junior prom. She had practiced the words for weeks, rehearsing in front of her bedroom mirror, until her mother knocked on the door to check if she was okay. When she finally approached David at his locker, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, he had looked at her with genuine surprise. "You want to go with me?" he had asked, not unkindly, but with such obvious confusion that Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Before she could respond, Jessica appeared beside them like a perfectly timed storm. "Oh, honey," she had said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "David's already going. With someone who actually knows how to have fun." See, the laughter that followed had chased Sarah all the way to the parking lot, where she sat in her mother's old sedan and cried until her eyes were puffy and red. She never asked anyone to any dance again. Now, a decade later, Sarah smoothed down her hair and tried to push away the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. The reunion invitation had arrived 3 months ago, printed on expensive cardstock that probably cost more than her entire prom budget had been. She had thrown it in the trash immediately, then fished it out an hour later, then thrown it away again. Her best friend Maria had finally convinced her to go. "You're a completely different person now," Maria had insisted during one of their weekly coffee dates. "You've got to show them who you really are." But that was exactly what Sarah was afraid of. What if she wasn't really different? What if underneath her new confidence and professional success, she was still the same scared girl who jumped every time someone laughed too loudly? She had spent the last 10 years building a life that would have seemed impossible to her teenage self. After graduating as valedictorian, despite the social struggles, she had earned a full scholarship to MIT. The transition to college had been like stepping into a different world, where intelligence was valued over popularity, and being different was actually an advantage. In her sophomore year, she had discovered her passion for aerospace engineering almost by accident. A guest lecture about helicopter design had captivated her imagination, and she found herself staying after class to ask questions that most students never thought to consider. Professor Williams had noticed her enthusiasm and offered her a position in his research lab. From there, everything had changed. Sarah threw herself into her studies with the same intensity she had once reserved for escaping into books. She learned about rotor dynamics and flight mechanics, spent countless hours in the lab, testing new designs, and slowly began to discover that she had a natural talent for understanding complex mechanical systems. Her professors began to take notice. Her research papers were published in prestigious journals. Companies started recruiting her before she even graduated. By the time she finished her master's degree, she had 3 job offers from major aerospace firms. But it was the opportunity with the military contractor that had really transformed her life. The position required security clearance and specialized training that most engineers never received. Sarah found herself learning to operate the very machines she had helped design, working alongside pilots and crew members who treated her as an equal rather than an outsider. The first time she had climbed into the cockpit of an Apache helicopter, she had felt something she had never experienced before: complete and total belonging. The machine responded to her touch like it was an extension of her own body. The complex systems that intimidated other engineers made perfect sense to her. Her instructor, a gruff ex-military pilot named Jake, had watched her first solo flight with amazement. In 20 years of teaching, he had told her afterward, "I've never seen anyone take to this bird like you have." Now Sarah was one of only a handful of civilian engineers certified to pilot military aircraft. She worked on classified projects that pushed the boundaries of aviation technology. Her colleagues respected her expertise, and her opinion could influence million-dollar decisions. But standing in her bathroom, preparing to face her high school classmates, all of that seemed to fade away. She was still the girl who had been voted most likely to become a cat lady in the unofficial senior class polls that circulated through social media. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision. She wasn't going to hide anymore. The Westfield Marriott ballroom buzzed with the familiar energy of forced enthusiasm and carefully constructed small talk. Sarah arrived exactly 30 minutes after the official start time, having calculated that this would be late enough to avoid the initial crowd but early enough to not draw attention to her entrance. She had chosen her outfit carefully. A simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy, paired with heels that added just enough height to make her feel confident. Her contact lenses had replaced the thick glasses, and her once unruly hair was styled in soft waves that framed her face. She looked good, she knew that. But walking into that ballroom still felt like stepping back in time. The decorations were exactly what she had expected. Blown-up yearbook photos, school colors draped everywhere, and a DJ playing the same songs that had soundtracked their teenage years. Round tables filled the space, each one a potential minefield of awkward conversations and painful memories. Sarah? Sarah Martinez? She turned to find Tom Bradley, one of the few classmates who had never actively participated in the social hierarchy that had made her life miserable. He had been quiet too, though in a different way. The kind of quiet that came from confidence rather than fear. "Tom, hi," she said, genuinely pleased to see a friendly face. "How are you?" "I'm great. You look amazing, really different." He paused, seeming to realize how that sounded. "I mean, you look confident." Happy. They talked for a few minutes about safe topics. Jobs, cities, general life updates. Tom had become a teacher, which somehow didn't surprise Sarah at all. He had always been one of the few people who actually listened when others spoke. "Have you seen Jessica and her crew yet?" Tom asked, lowering his voice slightly. Sarah's stomach tightened. "Not yet. They're holding court over by the bar. Same as always." Tom's expression was sympathetic. "You know, you don't have to prove anything to anyone here." But Sarah knew he was wrong. She absolutely did have to prove something, if only to herself. As if summoned by their conversation, Jessica's distinctive laugh rang out across the ballroom. Sarah turned to see her former tormentor surrounded by the same circle of friends who had enabled her behavior 10 years ago. Jessica looked exactly like Sarah had expected, perfectly put together, expensive clothes, the kind of effortless beauty that had made Sarah feel invisible in high school. "Oh my God, is that little Sarah Martinez?" The voice came from behind her, and Sarah recognized it before she turned around. Rebecca Walsh, Jessica's former lieutenant and current real estate agent, judging by the business cards she was already handing out to anyone who would take them. "Hi, Rebecca," Sarah said evenly. "You look so different. I almost didn't recognize you." Rebecca's smile was the same predatory expression Sarah remembered from high school. "What are you up to these days? Still reading all those books?" The question was asked with the same condescending tone that had once made Sarah want to disappear. But something had changed. Instead of the familiar flush of embarrassment, Sarah felt a calm settle over her. "I'm an aerospace engineer," she said simply. "Oh. That sounds technical." Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. "Are you married? Kids?" "No to both. I've been pretty focused on my career." "Well, that's nice. Jessica just bought her third house, you know. The one in the Hamptons? It's absolutely gorgeous." Sarah nodded politely, watching as Rebecca's eyes scanned the room for someone more interesting to talk to. It was the same dismissive behavior that had once crushed Sarah's spirit. But now it just seemed small and petty. "Excuse me," Rebecca said suddenly. "I see someone I need to catch up with." Sarah watched her hurry away toward a group of former football players, already pulling out more business cards. Tom appeared beside her again, shaking his head. Some things never change, he muttered. No, Sarah agreed. But some things do. The evening continued in much the same pattern. Sarah moved through the ballroom like a ghost from her former life, engaging in polite conversations that danced around the obvious questions everyone wanted to ask. She could see people whispering, trying to figure out if she was really the same girl they remembered. David Thompson approached her near the dessert table, looking older but still handsome in the way that had once made her teenage heart race. Sarah, wow, you look incredible. Thank you, David. You look well too. I heard you're some kind of engineer? That's amazing. I always knew you were smart. Sarah almost laughed at the revisionist history. David had never given her a second thought in high school, and they both knew it. What about you? She asked, deflecting the attention away from herself. I'm in sales. Corporate accounts, mostly. It's good work. He paused, seeming to gather courage for something. Listen, I've always regretted how things went in high school. The prom thing, I mean. I was young and stupid and cared too much about what other people thought. Sarah studied his face, trying to determine if the apology was genuine or just the product of 10 years of maturity and a few drinks. It's fine, David. We were all different people then. Maybe we could get coffee sometime? Catch up properly? Before Sarah could respond, Jessica's voice cut through the ambient noise of the reunion like a knife through silk. Well, if it isn't our little bookworm. Sarah turned to face her former nemesis, flanked by the same group of women who had made her high school experience miserable. Jessica was still beautiful, still perfectly composed, but there was something harder about her now, something that suggested the last 10 years hadn't been as kind as her appearance suggested. Hello, Jessica. You clean up nice, Jessica said, her tone suggesting this was somehow surprising. I heard you're an engineer now. How? Practical. The word practical was delivered with the same disdain Jessica had once reserved for Sarah's secondhand clothes. I heard you're in marketing, Sarah replied calmly. Public relations, actually. I handle some very high-profile clients, celebrities, politicians, people like that. Jessica's smile was sharp. It's all about image, you know, helping people become the best versions of themselves. The implication was clear, and 10 years ago it would have sent Sarah fleeing to the bathroom to hide until she could escape. But standing there in that ballroom, surrounded by people who had once made her feel worthless, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before in this group's presence: complete and total calm. That sounds interesting, she said. I'm sure you're very good at it. Jessica's expression flickered, as if she had expected a different response. Around them, conversations had quieted as people began to notice the interaction between the former Queen Bee and her favorite target. So what kind of engineering? Jessica pressed. Bridges? Buildings? Aerospace. I work on military aircraft. Oh. Jessica's smile became more forced. Sarah could feel the attention of half the ballroom focused on their conversation. This was the moment she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The moment when she would either prove that she had changed or confirm that she was still the same frightened girl who had run away from every confrontation. She thought about her Apache, waiting for her at the base. She thought about the respect in her colleagues' eyes when she walked into a briefing. She thought about the feeling of absolute control and competence that filled her when she was in the cockpit. Actually, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet ballroom, I design and pilot them. The silence that followed Sarah's statement was deafening. Jessica's perfectly composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing something Sarah had never seen before. Uncertainty. You pilot military helicopters? David asked, his voice filled with genuine amazement. Apache attack helicopters, specifically, Sarah confirmed, her voice steady and confident. I'm one of the few civilian engineers certified for military aircraft operation. The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the unprecedented sight of someone standing up to Jessica Chen. Sarah could see phones being discreetly pulled out, as if people wanted to document this moment for posterity. That's impossible, Rebecca interjected, her voice shrill with disbelief. Women can't fly those things. Actually, Sarah said with a small smile, Women have been flying military aircraft for decades. And I don't just fly them. I helped design the navigation systems for the latest Apache models. Jessica recovered her composure, but Sarah could see the calculation behind her eyes. This wasn't going according to script. The quiet girl was supposed to stay quiet, was supposed to accept her place in the social order they had established years ago. Well, that's interesting, Jessica said, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. I'm sure it's very technical and boring. Not exactly glamorous work. You're right, Sarah agreed easily. It's not glamorous. But it is important. Important to who? Jessica pressed, sensing an opportunity to regain control of the conversation. It's not like you're saving lives or anything. The words hung in the air, and Sarah felt something shift inside her. All the years of hiding, of downplaying her achievements, of letting people like Jessica define her worth, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. Actually, Sarah said, her voice carrying a new edge, I am saving lives. The systems I design help protect the men and women who risk everything to keep us safe. The pilots who fly the aircraft I help build come home to their families because of work people like me do. She paused, looking around at the faces surrounding her. Some amazed, some skeptical, some beginning to show the first signs of respect. But you wouldn't understand that, would you, Jessica? Your job is about making people look good on the surface. Mine is about making sure they survive. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Jessica's face flushed red, and for the first time in Sarah's memory, the queen bee seemed at a loss for words. Listen, Jessica said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Just because you've got some fancy job doesn't mean you're better than everyone else. You're still the same weird girl who couldn't get a date to save her life. The attack was desperate and personal, designed to cut Sarah down to size. But instead of the familiar sting of humiliation, Sarah felt only pity. Looking at Jessica now, she could see what 10 years had really done to her former tormentor. The desperation behind the perfect facade, the need to tear others down to feel important, the inability to find value in anything beyond surface appearances. You know what, Jessica? Sarah said quietly. You're absolutely right about one thing. I couldn't get a date in high school. I was too busy studying. Too focused on my future to play the games that seemed so important back then. She looked around the circle of faces, seeing her classmates as if for the first time. Not as the intimidating figures from her memory, but as regular people who had peaked in high school and were now trying to recapture something that had never been as meaningful as they thought it was. I spent 4 years in this school feeling like I wasn't good enough. Like I needed your approval to matter. But you know what I learned? Your approval was never worth having. The ballroom had gone completely quiet now. Even the DJ seemed to sense the moment and had lowered the music to a barely audible whisper. I've got something to show you. Sarah continued, pulling out her phone. Something that might help you understand what real achievement looks like. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Jake answered on the second ring. Sarah? Everything okay? You sound different. I'm fine, Jake. Actually, I'm better than fine. Listen. Remember that favor you owe me from the Portland project? Of course. What do you need? I need you to bring Big Bird to the Marriott downtown, the one on 5th Street. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You want me to bring the Apache? To a hotel? There's a parking lot behind the building. It's big enough, and I need to make a point. Jake's laughter was warm and knowing. Roger that, boss. Give me 20 minutes. Sarah hung up and looked around at the stunned faces surrounding her. What did you just do? Tom asked, his voice filled with amazement. I called in a ride, Sarah said simply. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of whispered conversations and nervous energy. Word had spread through the ballroom like wildfire. And soon the entire reunion was buzzing with anticipation and disbelief. Some people insisted Sarah was bluffing, that she was the same pathetic girl from high school playing an elaborate prank. Others began to realize that maybe, just maybe, they had seriously underestimated their former classmate. Jessica and her circle had retreated to a corner table, their whispered conversations growing more animated as the minutes ticked by. Sarah could see them glancing in her direction, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. Then they heard it, the distinctive whump, whump, whump of helicopter rotors approaching. The sound grew louder and louder until the windows of the ballroom began to vibrate with the rhythm of the powerful engines. "No way," someone whispered. "She actually did it," another voice said in amazement. Sarah smiled and walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before her like a wave. Behind her, she could hear the scraping of chairs as people rushed to follow her outside. The Apache helicopter sat in the parking lot like a mechanical predator, its angular lines and weapon systems making it clear that this was no ordinary aircraft. The rotors were still spinning, creating a wind that whipped through the crowd of stunned reunion-goers. Jake climbed out of the cockpit, his flight suit and helmet marking him as unmistakably military. He walked over to Sarah with a huge grin on his face. "Your chariot awaits, boss," he said, having to shout over the noise of the engines. Sarah turned to face her former classmates, who stood in a loose semicircle around the helicopter, their faces illuminated by the aircraft's running lights. Jessica stood at the front of the group, her mouth open in shock. "This is what I do," Sarah called out, her voice carrying clearly despite the noise. "This is who I am. Not the girl you thought you knew, not the person you decided I should be, but who I actually became when I stopped caring what you thought about me." She walked toward the helicopter, then paused and turned back. "Jessica, you asked earlier if my work was glamorous. You're right. It's not. But you know what it is? It's real. It matters. And it's mine. After then. With you. After then. It's mine." With that, Sarah climbed into the cockpit of the Apache. Jake strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, and within moments, they were lifting off into the night sky. Through the canopy, Sarah could see the crowd below, still standing in amazement as the reunion they thought they knew dissolved into something entirely different. As they gained altitude, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For 10 years, she had been haunted by the ghosts of high school, by the voices that told her she wasn't good enough, smart enough, pretty enough to matter. But sitting in the pilot's seat of one of the most advanced aircraft ever built, with the lights of her hometown spreading out below her, Sarah finally understood something that had taken her far too long to learn. She had never needed their approval. She had always been enough. And now, finally, she knew it.